5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to Racing World, brought to you by Perspective Group. It's your motorsport podcast show in conjunction with Race Control Magazine.
Well, welcome to another edition of Racing World, your motorsport podcast show. Two great guests in the show today. Bob, obviously, to talk about the Brazilian F1 Grand Prix and V8 Supercars from across the Tasman as well. And our first guest in the show, someone that I just have always wanted to be able to chat with, and I'm really looking forward to it, Micheal Pickens, multiple New Zealand sprint car and midget champion. And I'm really, really looking forward to having him on the show as we count down to Speedway at Lucas Oil Western Springs Speedway, due to kick off as soon as COVID will allow. Well, joining us now on Racing World. Now, this is a big one, people. Multiple New Zealand midget champion, sprint car champion, general all-round rock star in New Zealand Speedway circles. Micheal Pickens, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it.
Look, I think we've all been looking forward to a Speedway season starting, so this is probably the closest that we've got so far. But in terms of a season coming, obviously we're waiting for the green light, red light, orange light, whatever light for Western Springs. In terms of your planning, how do you deal with the situation that we're all in at the moment in terms of car builds and things like that?
It's a little bit difficult, because we've got to press on and that just so we're racing, when the season starts. And obviously that's not going to happen, but we don't know what the Prime Minister is going to throw at us next. So we've just got to be ready. And unfortunately, it's difficult with sponsors because obviously we want to give them bang for buck and we can't do it right now, but we've still got to spend a lot of money to get race ready and, crew uniforms and tyres, fuel, that sort of thing. So we're just got to put ourselves in a position where we can hit the ground running whenever the hell that green, amber, red light happens. So it's the preparation wise, it's like no other season really.
I guess you would have still been targeting what would have been the original kickoff date for the Springs and worked backwards from that, regardless of the sort of situation we're in.
Yeah, I mean, we've been able to take our time a little bit more because obviously we knew we weren't going to get practices in and that sort of thing in October. But all the same, we're pretty well ready to go now. A few little tidbits to finish off. And man, we can't wait. The guys are absolutely fizzing at the bung and we're all kind of just itching ready to go.
Now, we have a lot of viewers that are offshore outside of New Zealand, particularly parts of Europe, who probably have never even seen midget racing. And as you well know, I had some friends of mine from Italy come and watch you last season at Western Springs. So for the average person who may be watching the show who's not a Western Springs person, how do you sum up racing at Western Springs?
Western Springs is really unique. It's little old New Zealand, but it's a speedway on a world stage. It really is. The atmosphere is absolutely like no other track in Australia or America for that matter. And we're so privileged here that we get to race at Western Springs and hopefully for many more years to come. But it's that the local talent here, although we've missed the international series, now for a few years in a row, but the local talent is super deep and, it's just electric. The place is really like no other. It's really special.
You've raced a lot, both in Australia and in the US in midget categories and other categories as well. What we have here in New Zealand and the depth that we have in our midget fields and our sprint car fields and the level of preparation and presentation is equal to anything that you'd see overseas, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, obviously, we're not professional here as such, but that aside, the equipment is, it might as well be, compared to America, it's absolutely right up there. And, sprint car numbers have really bounced up this year. I think they've got 32 cars registered to Western Springs, let alone any other tracks. So, those have really come on strong, which is cool for us. I've been in it now, I guess, for eight seasons in the sprint car. So it's neat to see that category grow. And the midgets, they're always got to be midgets, they're always going to have reasonable numbers and the diehard fans. So, really looking forward to the season to kick off.
If I had to throw a tricky one at you, because you've kind of left yourself open for this one now, if you had the choice to drive the sprint car or the midget, which one would you go for first?
I get asked this question all the time, and we actually had a bit of a Zoom meeting with CRC the other day, and the staff were asking me, what do you prefer of it? And my answer is always the same, in that the midget is more racy just because of the lack of aerodynamics.
Yeah.
But the sprint car is more rewarding as a car to drive on its own because of the aerodynamics. It's such a fast car, so much horsepower. The things are absolutely locked down to the track. There's nothing like 900 horsepower on the boards and not even lifting if you're in clear air and the track's hooked up. That you can't compare that to nothing. But in the same respect, the midget is when the track slicks off a little bit or whatever, and you're slicing and dicing and chopping, and everyone's throwing dive bombs at each other. You can't beat that either. So they're both really neat cars in their own respect.
One of the things that's come up during this COVID period that we seem to be forever in at the moment, drivers that race in circuit series have been doing a lot of sim racing to stay race sharp, because they can, and it very much, the simulators that are on the market today replicate what it is like for them in a race car. They can even, replicate the seating position and everything like that. But for you, for either the midget or the sprint car, there's not really an option for you to be able to do that, is there?
There actually is now. There's a company, Speed Nation in New Zealand. They actually supplied me with a simulator. To be honest, I've never been into this sort of thing. I'm sort of more an outside guy or hands-on or whatever. But I've actually got into a bit of sim racing. I can't say I'm the best at it, but Speed Nation do an amazing simulator that guys like Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, Shane Van Gisbergen, they all spend hours and hours on them. And they do a super realistic dirt midget and dirt sprint car, which is run through iRacing.com. So, it's quite neat because, any Joe Blogs can jump on there and have a go and actually race against someone like myself. So that's something this lockdown sort of brought about as other ways to keep yourself entertained, keep yourself, sort of mind in the game. So, check out speednation.co.nz.
Okay, so I didn't realise there was something for the dirt track type racing as well as the circuit racing. So you've at least got the ability to line up against a few others and give it a go, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, I've got a ways to go to get a little better on the simulator, that's for sure. But it's there's nothing like keeping your eye on the game, and I think anything you can do is an advantage.
You mentioned the name Kyle Larson. Now, we were lucky enough to see him racing against you at the Springs a few seasons ago, and obviously only 2 weeks ago he became a NASCAR champion. It's a huge step from where we saw him. But there's been so many drivers that have come through Western Springs on the pathway to multiple things. But you're one of those guys as well, and I think New Zealand needs to recognise that at times, that you've represented the country offshore and everything, and there's a lot that goes into it. You've got a great infrastructure behind you in terms of the crew that work for you on the night. I've watched them, and they just go about their business as if it's natural and leave you to get on with the driving part a lot of the time.
Yeah, they sure do, and particularly running two cars on the same night, you rely heavily on your both crew. And there's times where I don't know what setup my car's got, because I literally jump out of one into the other on the infield or in the straight after the race, for that matter. So you do rely heavily on your pit crew, and like the last 50 lapper we won, we burst a radiator halfway through the night, and the guys swapped that out, and we ended up winning that night. So it gives you an example of it. The guys just picking up the pieces, and the crowd would really know no different. They wouldn't realise the boys have dropped the radiator, put another one in, bleed the system, and got going again. So I've got amazing people around me, and obviously the reliability they have. I mean, it speaks for itself.
I think, again, for people who haven't perhaps been to Western Springs or to a speedway in New Zealand, and you're watching this podcast, because I know there's some of you, or you're listening to it, I urge you to go to Western Springs this season to check out this guy in particular. There's a reason why he's won as many titles as he has. He's as good as what he is. Michael, that home crowd, at Western Springs, when you're out there, and I've seen you do, your donuts on the grass, I know, after the race, it really does mean something to you as a driver, doesn't it?
It sure does. We've got the most incredible fan base here in New Zealand. When I go and race overseas, I have a great following, and I really appreciate it. But there's nothing like having, your local fans that have supported you for years and years and years, stand up and it means a lot, and the atmosphere, I guess, makes it so special at Western Springs. You talk about the donuts. I remember when I won my first ever New Zealand title in 2003, and that was the first time I ever did them. And actually on a racing page in the yellow DeWalt car, and where the red tyres are blazing and smoke everywhere. And I'll never ever forget that. And the crowd had never really seen a midget do that before. So it was really special, and something I really hope the fans enjoy.
You've pretty well mastered it now. You've had plenty of practice at it, that's for sure.
Yeah, practice makes perfect, doesn't it?
Now, just one thing before I let you go, because I know you're busy and you're getting ready for the season as well. When you're racing at the Springs, and I've talked to Graham Standring about this a fair bit, the average lap, we'll use the midget as the example. How, as a driver, do you notice the difference between, say, turn 1, 2, 3, and 4 as you're doing that lap, or is it all just 13 seconds of blur?
No, quite different. We do break the track up into 4 corners, like you say, 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's not so much what the shape of the track, which is slightly different, but it's more that, one turn might be heavier, like as in more grip than the other, or one might have a bigger cushion than the other. So we're always talking about trying to set the car up to optimize the best of those both turns, and putting a fast lap together. You really have to be quite pinpoint and I guess make the most of what you've got there, because the 2 turns are never the same. And
then I've seen all the drivers obviously across the night. You're watching that, and your team's watching as the track evolves across the night as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. And once again, I rely heavily on my crew for that. I can keep an eye on it, obviously on the track, but as far as a setup change, I rely heavily on the crew to adjust the car as we need it if I'm not around. And they obviously do a hell of a job, because a lot of the time I jump in, like I said earlier, without knowing what I got, and it's always damn near perfect.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, Mike, I'd like to thank you very much for being part of this week's Racing World Show. We'd like to catch up with you again as the season kicks off. We're hearing all sorts of things about dates that are going to be coming at us real fast, and we'll get to see that CRC car back out there again soon as well.
Yeah, I can't wait. I appreciate you having me along, and let's just hope Jacinda lets us go racing pretty soon. We're absolutely fizzing at the bung to get going. We can't wait. Yeah,
well, you can go racing, and I'll go make some tally, and we'll call it even, and we'll see you at Western Springs, and it's going to be a great season ahead. Thanks so much, Micheal Pickens, to join us on Racing World. Well, joining me now, Bob, plenty happened in the time we sort of did the show last week to the time I published the show. One of those things, Hunter McElrea, confirmed now at Andretti Autosport in an Indy Lights car.
Yeah, I think it happened the moment you said it was going to happen. Yeah, it's fantastic news for him. And as I said last week, I think we both agreed that if he got the drive, which he did, then it would have been on severe talent more than money. And I think that's true. I think that's still true, because I'm sure there are quite a lot of people in southern states of America, and Miami especially, who have quite plenty of money to get into to motor racing if they want to. But of course, Hunter being Kiwi, what does he suffer from? Lack of money, generally, like all our drivers have. But there are a couple of people helping him. Maurice O'Reilly is one of them. And he has put together with other people a really good prospectus with for Hunter McElrea for people to invest in him, basically very much the same as the Scott Dixon thing years ago, and that paid back pretty well. I think it's I think it's a very worthwhile thing to do, because I think Hunter McElrea is going to go somewhere. He's going to earn money for sure, whatever he does, I think. So good on Maurice O'Reilly and Hunter's parents, Andy McElrea, and people like that, for getting behind him and actually doing it, because Hunter is a very talented driver, and he's making his trying to make his mark in America. So good on him. And if you want to get in touch with that, actually, you can send David or I an email, and we'll give you either Morris's number if anybody wants to get involved, or his father Andy. Give him the number, and we'll see if we can link you up. So, but it's an investment. It ain't. It's not a charity. It's an investment.
That's right.
So there you go.
It says a lot about the future of Indy Lights right now as well. I think it's going to be in for a very big season next year with Roger Penske and Penske Entertainment Corp taking it over, bringing it back from Anderson Promotions. The interest in drivers and teams talking about running Indy Lights car, Exclusive Motorsport, that another Kiwi, Billy Fraser, drives for. They're going to have 2 Indy Lights cars next year. So finally, after quite a few years of a little bit of a stall, I think we're going to see some great things in Indy Lights. So, yep.
Yeah, I agree. And we got Ryan Yardley, who has said today that he's intent on going back to America. Well, he's still in America, but he's coming home and going back to America to try and get back into whatever one of the formulas he wants to do. But that's after he does the New Zealand Grand Prix here, which incidentally I heard today, as many people have, that the first meeting of the Toyota Racing 86 series that was scheduled to be at Hampton Downs, or scheduled to take place, I've forgotten where it was, Hampton Downs or Puku now because there's so many cancellations. That has been cancelled as well. This is the mid-December meeting. So who knows when we're actually going to kick off here. But as you said at the top, to me anyway, off air, it was a big weekend. And this is one of those shows that I wish we had an hour and a half to talk about things instead of the 30 minutes that we think is probably about right. So the Brazilian Grand Prix. Well, what do we think of that is my first question to you.
Well, it kind of all started really with the sprint race, didn't it? And I think we've both expressed our opinions on sprint races. They haven't changed. I'm sorry, but they haven't changed. But what came out of that was good drive by Bottas, very good drive by him, and then kind of hit the fan with Lewis and rear wings and stuff like that. And it's still going on. Yeah. And Red Bull, I see this morning saying that there is another part of the wing that they were originally intending to protest. It's just going to turn into, dare I say, a shit fight that we don't need. It's a championship right now that's going to the wire. Let's just let these. I thought it was a fantastic call by Michael Massey to let them race on the track rather than the stewards getting involved when, you know, both cars clearly went off track when they were passing each other, but it was let them race, and they did. And Toto obviously disagrees with that. Christian kind of hasn't said much on that one. He's contemplating other things, but at the end of the day, it was a good race, a fantastic drive by Lewis. Whether you're a fan of Lewis Hamilton or not, you cannot take away what he did in that car at the Brazilian Grand Prix. No,
and to go back to the beginning, a 7-time world champion, and he showed it. He showed it, absolutely showed it the whole time. It's a drive that, in my opinion, is better than any of Senna's that I can think of. But maybe I'm wrong there, but specifically the one that Ayrton Senna is hailed as being his best drive, which he never agreed with, incidentally, and that was the one in Donington, where, you know, everybody said that was his best drive. I think Lewis Hamilton outdid that, frankly. I mean, he had a power unit change, a grid penalty, disqualified, thrown to the back for the sprint qualifying, came up to 5th, passing cars in a 24-lap race to do that, then winning from 10th on the grid, passing Max Verstappen, getting pushed off the track. I don't care what anybody says. He got pushed off the track to do it when he was escorted off the track. And then, you know, from Lewis Hamilton's point of view, absolutely staggering weekend. The Verstappen escorting Lewis off the road, well, suddenly the FIA doesn't have the onboard camera going at that moment, but they do have it somewhere, but they haven't announced that. They have neither released anything or released the rear wing that they say is all about. The penalty was all about in the first place. If they suddenly decide to want to give Verstappen a retrospective penalty, well, they can't really. It's done and dusted. It's history. But if they did, that puts him behind Bottas, which changes the championship again. So I think fine, they've let them race. They let them both go off the road and come back on. No damage, no harm done at that moment. Could have been. Yeah. But the stewards have now given themselves a new standard to judge things by, because they penalised that before. So now the standard has moved again. Yes. And this is what winds people up about the standards moving. I mean, well, it was an exciting race. It was one of the best races I've seen. Yeah. I think the other thing on that whole thing is this morning also, Lewis cops a €5,000 fine for undoing the seatbelts on the cool-down lap, because that's not within the regulations. Sure, it's not within the regulations, but it's like,
do we need more of this silly carry on, or do we need to concentrate on a championship? And really, at the end of the day, yes, he must have broken those rules by undoing his seatbelts, but is now the time to stir up all of that? I think the thing that stood out in my mind, as you've kind of just touched on, Lewis had everything going for him. And I'm not always a Hamilton fan, but the headspace that he had in the weekend was clearly more than anyone else did. He rose to the occasion mentally. And that's an attribute that any driver, should be extremely proud of, because he just shone.
Yeah, he did. He did shine. And somebody who did not shine, and I know it's my favourite whipping boy, is Christian Horner. I mean, he comes back with the old, nothing to see here with Verstappen pushing Hamilton. No, that was fair. Absolute bollocks from his point of view. He's still coming out with this sort of thing. If we can't beat them, they must be cheating. If we can't beat them, they're cheating. My total antipathy towards him has not diminished by his attitude at all in the performance he gave personally over the weekend. No. It was just, what a slimy so-and-so. I'm sorry.
It's becoming
creepy.
A bit of a battle between the drivers on the track and Toto and Christian off the track. But moving on.
But if you've got a problem, put a protest in. Yeah. Don't keep all this, we know, absolute rubbish. And incidentally, I read something this morning just going on. Do you reckon Mercedes, they're introducing big engine changes at each race? Well, there's not many things left now. Is it a possibility that they're actually introducing new engines and taking penalties for them that are suddenly more powerful than the previous ones, because they are not building in the reliability they need to for 7 or 8 races? They only need the reliability of one or two, so you can take the tolerances down. It gives you more power. It's there's a lot to be thought about there, really. I mean, you take the penalty and you go faster and you can get yourself out of it. I don't know. I think I don't know. But what a great race by Hamilton. Verstappen, not so much. It was all right. Bottas, Perez and Leclerc, they were pretty average. Sainz, average plus, I suppose. Gasly, average plus. He did well. Ocon, average. Norris, average plus, apart from the start. Raikkonen, way below average. And then we go all the way down to Raikkonen, who got it completely cocked up again. And it is, I don't know if I'm going on too much here, but did you see something that he said, because Raikkonen is retiring, and in that race, Mick Schumacher said, well, it's a shame I couldn't race with Raikkonen in that race. And Raikkonen came back by saying, well, let me know in 1 or 2 races, I'll slow down so you can race with me. It's fantastic. Raikkonen stuff. So anyway, there you go.
McLaren didn't really make that much of an inroad on Ferrari in this battle for 3rd place either before we leave Formula One here.
They didn't make any inroad at all. They only got 1 point out of it. It appears that Ricciardo's problem was because of a cracked chassis, which is, and it was around the engine thing, around the engine mountings or around the engine parts, which caused a decrease in power. So they've got to sort that out. If it's a cracked chassis, that's bigger than anything. News today as well that, and it has been denied, that Audi, well, somewhere it came from, Audi are buying McLaren, and immediately McLaren came back and denied it. So I don't know. It's the smoke and fire. I have no idea. Who knows? I mean, it would be good for McLaren, to be honest, because they allegedly have got money issues, and for Audi to come in, they've got pretty powerful money behind them with Volkswagen. So if it was there, great. If it's not there, well, they've said it's not. Absolutely not true. Absolutely no way on earth, which is very similar to things that football managers are told the week before they're sacked. But
maybe we could start another rumour and say that Andretti Autosport are buying them.
Well, yeah. I think might need a bit more money than buying into the other end of the pit lane there. Yeah.
So leaving Formula One, the only other tipping point there was the fact that the freight was so late from Mexico. So it'll be very interesting to see how it gets from Brazil to the Middle East this week. And that's certainly the first time Formula One's been tested like that in recent times. But that's the joys of the triple header that they're in the middle of.
That's true. I mean, a triple header all over the world. I don't think there's been a precedent for it. It's just staggering. But I know that, as many people do, the way Formula One works and the people in Formula One work. Yes, the freight was late. Did you notice anything from first practice to last practice? No. Not a thing. They just do the job that's necessary. There isn't a person in Formula One that doesn't work his butt off when he needs to, apart from a couple of team principals. So, you know, they just did it. It just got done. Simple as that. So
it's good. You know, so moving across to Tasman, and really I'm a little bit bored, as we predicted, with Sydney Motorsport Park. Yes, there was a bit of biff and bash. Obviously, Van Gisbergen and his now boss, Jamie Whincup, had a little bit of a clash, but really, as far as I'm concerned, roll on Bathurst, because we need to get out of Sydney Motorsport Park and down to Bathurst. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree, but I'd sooner see them racing every weekend at Eastern Creek, Sydney Motorsport Park, than not racing at all.
Oh, yeah.
Because every race has thrown up something different. I mean, if you think about it, the weekend really was all about Anton De Pasquale and the Shell team speed. Davison was up and down a little bit and a bit disappointed. And it should have been all about young Will Brown winning a race. Should have been. Mm. But all you read about is the squabble between Shane and Whincup. Yeah. And I think Whincup was way offside with all that anyway. If Shane had got past, which he probably could have done by exercising Shane's muscles as only Shane can, they would have won the race. But so their squabbling denied them winning the race. But good that it, Will Brown, Rode Kostecki and Erebus are really showing some speed at the weekend. I mean, Will Brown is I wouldn't say likeable character. I don't mean that. Of course he's likeable. He is a character, and he's going to be a character. He's irrepressible, really, isn't he? With all the pit stops that have gone wrong, he's just kept it all going. So I think it's, you know, it's a shame that it's not all about him in many ways. I think he won because Shane didn't have the chance to challenge him, but nonetheless he won the race, and he drove really well to do it, and he was fast all weekend and all sorts of things. So he as opposed to Jamie Whincup, how many times has he denied being told things, especially at Bathurst? He's got his own rules there, and now perhaps his own ego is overtaking the fact that that it would have been better for the team to have won the race, because only the day before he said, doesn't matter who wins the race, it's most important to bring the winning trophy back to the garage. Well, sorry, you've just gone against what you said the day before. Yeah, that's all there is to it.
And then obviously a little bit like our Hunter McElrea thing, as soon as we were saying it last week, things were happening in the background. So the Murphy Stanaway entry, the wildcard entry now will be happening this year. We kind of alluded to the fact that we thought that it was going to be a case, partially because of MIQ, no testing for them. So it would have been a very tall ask, but you know, they'll be back, and we'll wait and see how Russell Ingall goes and his wild card. So that should be good. And there's a test of all things at Sydney Motorsport Park called a pre-enduro test, which I'm sure is just to bring the enduro drivers into line. But,
well, it would. They need testing at Sydney Motorsport Park, don't they? So they don't know it well enough, do they?
Of all places, fantastic. So, and then on
we've got this weekend as well, of course, 2 enduro races coming up, and that'll be the last time. So, well, we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Then on 2 wheels, there was a couple of memorable moments in the weekend, and the retirement of someone that's been around for a very long time. We actually saw him in a rally car in New Zealand, of all things. Yep. Not the announcement, but the end of Valentino Rossi full-time in MotoGP. But what a career that guy's had. Yeah,
I mean, fantastic. Absolutely amazing. I mean, the champion this year is Fabio Quartararo and the Monster Yamaha. And also, before I get to Rossi, Danilo Petrucci is retiring as well, or retiring out of MotoGP. And that was pretty emotional for him. But Valentino Rossi, 26 years racing, 86 Premier Class victories. I mean, but the character, the person, the charisma is huge, massive.
And the brand in its own right.
Yeah, he hasn't changed, it seems, since he was a kid. Obviously, they've been showing lots of photographs and film and stuff from when he actually entered the sport, or at least big-time motor racing or bike racing. And he really hasn't changed. I mean, what he's brought to the sport is far more than Valentino Rossi. he's brought to the sport a whole different viewership and a whole different thing. I mean, Yellow 46, I can't imagine anybody taking that number on in the future. So, yeah, it's a shame. But at the weekend, as Max Verstappen said, it comes a time when every driver has to retire at some point or another, and the young riders come up. So it's time, simple as that. Unfortunately, he finished 10th in the race, finished 18th in the championship this year, so didn't go out on a high. But he doesn't need to go out on a high because he is his own high. Simple as that.
Exactly right. Another interesting thing it's come to mind, of course, Kiwis in action over the weekend. Scott Dixon teamed up with Earl Bamber in the Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac for the last Enduro of the year in North America. Earl, a late minute call in to the team. They did a good job, and Earl's with the team for next season as well. So the finish overall, but good to see Dixie back out in the car as well. And they wait through the long Indianapolis winter, really. Yeah.
Well, there could be another person that's looking at a furtherance of his career, or two, in fact. I mean, Earl's been around for a little bit as well, and just by him getting that contract means he couldn't drive as a co-driver with Shane this year in Bathurst. So, but good to see both of them there. I mean, it's very competitive cars, and they're competitive drivers. There's no doubt about that.
We'll see them in action at the Raw before the 24, and then, of course, the Rolex 24 in January of next year, which all of a sudden is actually not that far away, really. We're, almost into December, so the season is kicking on. So 3 Grand Prix, of course, that we're in the middle of. We've done 2 of the 3. Middle East now is the Middle Eastern swing, really, to end the championship with 1 new track completely in there. I really don't know who's going to win this thing, whether it's going to be Max or Lewis.
No, maybe the stewards will win it. I don't know now. I really don't. If Mercedes have found something that makes their car quicker, if they're bringing new engines in all the time to go faster, because that thing he was driving at the weekend, Hamilton was driving, was pretty damn quick. And I put a lot of that down to Hamilton, unless he has a different car to Bottas now. I don't know. But none of the other Mercedes engines looked anywhere near as quick as Hamilton's car. So it's going to be interesting. But for sure, the bickering and the moaning will go on and on and on, and Christian Horner will keep pointing at things and saying, "Oh, we know there's something secret there." I mean, it's just going to go on.
I think they've all been watching Drive to Survive too much.
Yeah, probably so. But nonetheless, I think honestly on track, I think Lewis Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen are going to drive hard, and as long as they drive hard like they did in Brazil, then fine, because they didn't touch each other. No. It might have been a bit of this, that, and the other going on. I don't know who the tracks are going to favour. I don't know. No idea. We'll see what happens when we get there.
That's great. That's what it's all about. That's what we follow it for. That's why we get to talk about it, and that's the success of it as well. And it's it's good to have finally, because Lewis has kind of knocked it off a little bit early in recent years. It's nice to have a championship that's going to go to the wire as well. So that's quite good.
Well, maybe
as well.
Yeah, maybe the last race will be both of them being penalised before the race. So they both have to start on the back row. And then it rains and it stays raining, which is never done before in most countries. And it stays raining for an hour and 20 minutes. Then it dries up. Then it rains again. And see who wins then. That'll be interesting to see.
It'll be a Haas 1-2.
Yeah. No, I think that's one thing that can be discounted completely.
Well, great to chat with you again. As we said, we've got one more of this triple header to go. So next week we'll talk about Middle Eastern races. We'll talk about Sydney Motorsport Park as well, probably. And
apparently there's a race there.
With what's happening locally, or the latest announcements on what's happening locally, not only for the circuit series, which now looks like it's pretty much set to kick off in January, so we won't see anything till January. And then also with what's happening with speedways, particularly in the upper half of the country, who are sort of in that same position with hopeful that they'll get away by mid-December. So yeah, plenty to talk about next week. So I'll let you get back to, I don't know, your gardening, and I'll get back to getting the show ready to get it online. And we thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to have a listen or watch of Racing World. Well, that pretty much covers the show today. Great chatting with Micheal Pickens. Really, really great guy. Just phenomenal what he gets up to, his ability to jump between those cars like he does between the sprint car and the midget, and the presentation standard that Micheal Pickens Motorsport just brings to Speedway, along with so many other drivers at Lucas Oil Western Springs Speedway, is just phenomenal. And that's why it's one of the best places in town. So until next week, when we get to do it all again in another F1 Grand Prix, take care, stay safe, and thanks for watching.